Right, the 8 candidates who will be interviewed for the position of Public Protector have been announced. 14 names were nominated out of the 36 by the ad-hoc committee dealing with this matter. And the top 8 to receive the most nominations from parties made the cut. This comes off the back of a public participation process in which members of the public were allowed to study the 36 CVs and comment on the suitability of candidates. Let's now speak to legal analyst Mpumelelo Zikalala, who joins us now via Zoom. A very good evening, sir. Always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Good evening to you, and also good evening to your viewers.
All right, let's then talk about this participation process for these 8 candidates who have been nominated. What will that look like? I mean, we saw it was televised the last time around, the rigorous sort of participation process that, those that are in the last batch, the finalists, if I can call it that, went through. But let's talk about, just for the sake of our viewers, what we are to expect.
I think on this one, the committee was clear in terms of saying we're going to stick to what the requirements are. You see that a lot of the candidates that are there are indeed advocates. So it is individuals who are learned colleagues, the people who have studied within the field of law, who have various experiences within the legal sector, the legal industry. So I think that was the committee was looking for. The only problem, the issue that I might have, though, is when it comes to the selection process and limiting to the number of 8, you shouldn't say because a person has received the most number of nominations, that's what we're going to go by. In fact, there's no standard rule which was stated earlier to say that whatever person is voted for or gets the most nominations will make the cut. So it wasn't like that. So you can't create the rules as you make them. So in my view, I would have said, if anyone qualifies, no matter if there are 30 or 40 names that are there, if you have the requirements which are stated within the legislation, then we want to hear what you have to say within the interviews.
What's your view of, the very sort of strong involvement of political parties during this entire process? I mean, at the end of the day, this is someone who should be protecting the public. It's a public protector. And one wonders, when there is this process going on, that some political parties might be wanting to have what they would perceive their people on these lists. What's your view on that?
It's twofold. One is to say you want the process to be open as much as possible. You want everyone to have a voice as to what should happen and who should be appointed, and for them to have a voice and a particular vote as to who should be part of the process. Another view is that you look at what the legislation actually says. It says that it must be delegated to a committee of parliament. So parliament is made up essentially of political parties who are going to be there. But the more open it is, and they've tried to do that by saying, members of the public, can you please go and comment on these individuals? And I think the second part of the public participation process, let's call it that, would be allow members of the public to even pose questions or possible questions that must be sent or asked to the candidates. If they have any information that might be adverse or any information that must be good, it must be communicated to the chairperson's head, so that at the end of the day, they're able to place those questions to that candidate and they're able to answer. So we are basically adopting a similar stance as that of the JSC when it comes to the interviews of judges. And say, let's open it. We want to make sure that we have someone who's going to be credible, be trusted by all political parties, can be able to show political independence, and someone who's going to, his or her allegiance would be purely to the office of the public protector and nobody else. Yeah,
you say, it's very similar to how, judges are selected, and I would assume that the criteria for selection is very similar to that. So we're looking at also things like, being a fit and proper person. I would assume they're also looking into possible scandals. Let's talk about this criteria that you sort of hinted on there.
Remember that the Public Protectors Act does prescribe the type of individuals that are there in terms of legal qualifications, the number of years that a person must be within the profession. But then the contentious one, which is the fit and a proper person, in which even our courts have not defined it in a more definite way of saying who is a fit and proper individual. So the number of factors that will go in there. And I'm guessing there are a number of questions which are going to come from the political parties and the committee members and even members of the public if there are certain scandals of individuals that are there, especially if we look at such as the candidate of the current acting public protector, certainly the manner in which she has conducted herself within this particular office is going to be put on the spotlight.
Yeah.
In a similar manner, any other individuals who's vying for the job, in the manner in which they've acted before, is certainly going to be put under the spotlight. And they must be ready with the answers of saying, how independent are we going to be? Do I fit in within this particular process? Most importantly, I may qualify legislatively, but what is the new innovative way that you are coming with within this particular office? How you are going to make sure that the Office of the Public Protector is able to reach individuals in Motwe, Kamanak, in Soweto, and even in Sandton, equally, and serve them in a much more proper manner, in an equal manner in all spheres of government, in all spheres of the statuses of the public that we might have.
Yeah. The argument, could one raise the argument that, you speak about the current acting public protector, that she may perhaps have an unfair advantage when it comes to the other delegates? Could the other delegates perhaps think so? But then again, one could also think about the fact that, the last time around, Kevin Malunga, who was the deputy public protector, didn't make it as the public protector. So one can safely say that it is, a fair process and that everyone is on equal footing.
Definitely, and in fact, it might even work against you if you've been in that office before, because what you might find is individuals who are going to say, you are the one, a candidate who's been tried and tested, and you've certainly failed in proving yourself that you can be independent, you can be able to read the law, what actually states, and the interpretation of the ethics code, for example, which I guess is going to be one of the spotlight, one of the questions which are going to be posed to the candidates which are going to be there.
Yeah.
And the manner in which you've conducted your service is somewhat of a public record, and if it is a public record, then it's a process of saying your scrutiny is much more greater than the others. If it's a candidate that is not well known, maybe they can get away with a few questions here and there in terms of legislative compliance. But if you've been in the office before, the manner in which you've handled yourself, the manner in which you've handled matters, and the success of those matters is going to work for you. In any instances in which you have failed, certainly it's going to be highlighted, and it's one of the things which is going to make you lose points.
All right, Mr. Zikalala, always a pleasure to have you on the show.